Shalom. I can't talk too loud because the kids are all in bed. But I wanted to make this video for confirming the summer solstice, just to kind of get it out there for people to start thinking about. I guess most of us are new to trying to figure out the creator's times, looking at his timepieces for ourselves and not just relying on Google, because physical observation has shown there's something going on with different Google proclaimed days for things like equinoxes or equiluxes or this kind of thing. But so anyway, we we're starting to learn about how to look at the sun, and if you saw another one of my videos, I kind of talk about the equinox versus the equilux, and I've got this picture of, according to the Book of Enoch, the Book of Enoch says the sun and the stars bring the year in to 364 days with perfect justice. So we're going to talk about the sun right now, but I'm sure you must be able to confirm time with the stars as well. I want to learn more about that, but starting with the sun right now. And the thing is, the track of the sun, if you're looking at this picture, the Book of Enoch says there are 6 portals that the sun travels through at different times of the year. Now, I realize some people might have difficulty grasping what this is talking about, depending on your perspective of the universe, I suppose, but basically this movement through the portals, the simple way to think about it is when you watch a shadow move throughout the course of a day, it's swinging east to west, and I guess actually it swings west to east, but it's always in the east-west, west-east direction. These portals and the movement that I'm talking about is actually the north to south movement of that shadow, and we'll get into it in this video. But basically when the shadow of an object as the sun moves through the day sweeps it, it makes an arc, and that arc moves slightly back, slightly north or slightly south each day, depending on what time of year it is. And so if you're looking at this picture, the year is kind of chopped up into, I guess 4 parts, and it's chopped up by the equinoxes and the solstices, and the basically, if the sun kind of moves up and down this grid of 6 portals, and when it gets to the top, actually I'm not, I guess it would maybe depend on where you are, but the top or the bottom is either the longest and shortest day, and right in the middle at the 4th great portal where I say equator, that is where you would see, like, I guess the equinox occurring, either the spring or winter equinox, or is it fall equinox? Yeah, fall equinox. So anyway, the thing is, I just kind of dove into this, and learning about it, just started doing what other people I saw them doing, and took the word of more experienced people. But the more and more I looked into this, I started to question if it was really the most accurate way to look at this. And so I started out with a contraption I basically built the night before the spring equinox in 2017, and I was going to try and look for the equinox the next day, and I was trying to sight this contraption in on the North Star, and do all this stuff, and it was just kind of complicated and was kind of floppy, and it wasn't very accurate. And the thing I discovered about the North Star is it one problem I have with this method of sighting in on the North Star is the North Star does actually move a little bit. Not a lot, but it moves a little bit. And so I heard different people doing this may have ended up kind of with different days for the equinox or whatever. And I wonder if that's because they were all, maybe sighting in on the North Star at different times of the year when it was in a slightly different position, and so it was kind of messing things up and people weren't on the same page. Another thing I want to mention is I've seen people also, the two main methods I've seen for people trying to confirm the equinox was that method of sighting in the North Star, and you pretty much have to have like rolling years of data to be able to do that. Like it won't really tell you anything if you do it 1 year. Actually, even if you do it consecutive years, I'm not sure it really tells you anything. Another method I've seen people do is they on the day that they think the equinox occurs, they're looking for a plotted straight line, the crosshairs of the shadow of whatever strings they're using. They're looking for the shadow to create this straight line. And the problem I have with that is two problems. You would need to have multiple days of data to confirm it is actually straight compared to the day before or after, I suppose. Because as you'll see later in this video, like the movement is so slight, depending on how close your crosshairs or shadow or whatever you're using is to your board that you're marking on. But the other problem I have with this is if we go, if you think back to that picture with the 6 portals that I had up, it really, the only place you would ever get a straight line would have to be right on the equator. Anywhere else on the planet, it wouldn't ever quite be a straight line. So like people who say they do this, I mean, I've only seen them do it for 1 day, and like having collected some data myself, it's just so, the movement is so slight for the scale of the contraptions I've seen people using. And we're talking about strings width and stuff, and so depending on how thick the marker or lead is that you're using to make your marks, like I don't know if that's the most accurate way either. So anyway, all this to say, I began, I still have questions about confirming the equinox, but what eventually I started to realize is it makes a lot more sense to confirm the solstices, because those are the points in the year where if you're watching the shadow, and again, that north-south movement of the shadow through the 6 portals, on the solstices, the shadow's going to stop, and it's going to start heading back the other way. Like, and there's really no guesswork in that. Like, if you're watching the shadow around the time that you think the solstice is going to occur, you're going to see that moment where it shifts. There's going to be a day where you have the longest day and you have the shortest day, and that's that's going to be 2 points in the year that you can confirm the time, and then essentially you count your days off and your months off from there, 364 plus those your 30-day months plus those intercalendar seasonal days, those extra 4 days. But you can count, and I might still do some thinking to figure out if the equinox is a valid way to confirm the times, but right now the methods I've seen to do that I hear people getting different results, and it just isn't making as much sense to me as confirming with the solstice. So this video, I guess I'm going to fly through the rest of the video now, but it's going to talk about how to confirm the time with looking at the solstice. And so I think maybe I had a picture up, but I'm showing you what the shadow is going to look like, and we'll look at some actual pictures. But this sketch is showing kind of what you would expect to see. During the year, the sun is going to trace whatever object you're using, and you're looking at the shadow, it's going to trace a curve that looks something like this. And if you look out to the right, you'll see different dates. Those are 1 day apart. The shadow's going to move so much, and it's going to keep moving up or down depending on which solstice you're getting close to. And at some point, when you reach that solstice, the shadow's going to turn around and start coming back. And that makes a lot more sense to me. So the next thing that and I'm gonna try and include like all the errors I made and things I learned from. I'm gonna try and mention everything. So as you try this yourself, you maybe you can avoid some of the pitfalls I've discovered. But so anyway, the first thing I did was I just mounted a board to the handrail of my house deck. And I think I did that because if you remember the other sundial model I had that was really flimsy and it moved a lot, and it just didn't. You need to make sure that your sundial is not moving very much. So I figured the handrail on my house would not move much. So I actually screwed the board down, and then I shot a nail through the board. And that little nail, it's only like 3 inches tall, was my sundial. And so we'll look at pictures again. And the movement we're looking for is going to be this arc movement, moving north or south, and again through these different portals, 1 through 6, depending on the time of year. And so let's see. I think I have a picture of the first day I took data, and it's hard to see if you just look at this picture. I mean, it's really hard to tell that there's a curve there. The curve is so gentle. I do this with graph paper later, so you'll be able to see kind of exactly how much that curve is. And the curve, I think, actually does start to straighten out as you probably get closer to the equinox, but it's just so slight. Like, I just don't feel that that's an accurate way to say this day is the equinox, because it's just, the movement is so slight. But anyway, so this was the first day I collected data, and then I think I have a couple pictures of the next day. I collected data back to back just to try and get a feel for how much the shadow was moving for this 3-inch tall sundial I was using. And I think I zoom in on the picture here, and you can see, I think at like 9:23 a.m. the next day I come out, it's moved a little bit. If you look at it, it's not even the thickness of the pencil lead. That's how much it moved, but it did move, and you can tell it moved. I'll have more pictures that kind of show the movement throughout a day, but that's about as much as it moves. And again, coming up to the summer solstice of 2017, the shadow was moving backwards. So I've got a picture kind of showing, as you plot your points, that curved line is going to move. It's going to keep moving up, according to this sketch. So again, a picture of that gap. So then I want to tell you about another thing I discovered. So I thought that was cool, and I was like, okay, I'm going to be able to do this. And I think maybe a few weeks went by, maybe a couple months went by, and I decided to head back out to my board and kind of take some more readings. And I discovered my board was, I still don't really know what happened to it. It got very dirty and maybe was rotting. I don't know. So that it was hard to tell the shadow and the marks and stuff. So I decided I'd get a little more high tech, and I started using some graph paper. So we'll see a picture here of some graph paper, and that I was pretty excited about that. And then I discovered kind of my next pitfall. I wanted to see how easy it was to see the shadow moving day to day, and I came out the next day, and voila, my paper had got wet, and it had shrunk and crinkled up. And as I don't know, you can see in this next picture, I actually taped the paper down to my board, and I used a pencil to write where the corners was. The purpose for doing that, I think, was to make sure, like, if I used a new paper the next day, I could make sure it was at the right orientation or something. But the next morning when I went out and I saw the shrinkage, I could tell it had shrunk because, it moved from my marks. So that problem can be overcome in a couple ways. Either use better wood that doesn't rot, or if you're going to use paper, you need to take it in every night. Don't leave it out. Even there was one day it just got sprinkled on for a second, like just a little sprinkle of rain, and that killed the paper. So, man, that's something I'm still trying to figure out. Again, just kind of mentioning everything. So hopefully you can, if you have any ideas of how to overcome these things, leave your ideas in the comments for everyone to kind of discuss and learn from. And so anyway, once you overcome that, here's some data that I ended up taking. Again, you're looking for this arch, and on the graph paper you can see it. This curve. If you look at this picture, there are 3 dots. I think somewhere around like 130 to 150, in one grid of that graph paper. You can kind of see them. That is approximately solar noon, and the graph paper is oriented, so that's pretty much the high point of the arc. If you look at the other data points, they're kind of starting to sweep back, and you can see that curve. But it is still, it's a gentle curve, and like I said, I do think it'll get straight as you get to the equinox. But unless you are living at the equator, it's a matter of perspective, and you got to think about it. And unless you're on the equator, the movement's going to be slight, but it's just not going to be a good way to verify the equinox, I don't think. But anyway, I wanted to show a couple more pictures to give you an idea of how much the shadow moves on this graph paper. I think I'm going to break here for a video I recorded kind of discussing all that. So I'm just practicing getting ready for 2017 summer solstice. The only way it made sense to me, the year being divided in 4 parts and trying to figure out which season you're in by the equinoxes and the solstices. The only one that really made the most sense to me was the solstice, because if you watch the shadow, this is just a nail sticking out of a board. Well, that's pretty bad focus. I'll have some pictures. But anyway, the shadow moves, not east to west, but north to south. And so I took these marks that it's getting close to yesterday, and today is the 11th. I think you can almost kind of, maybe not. But I just waiting for the moment where it's going to get there, 1:13. It's in like a minute or two. And I want to see how much the shadow has moved in one day, so I have an idea of what I'm looking for on the day of the solstice. And the day of the solstice, the shadow's either going to stop or start moving backwards, I guess. So I'm going to look at my clock. I don't know if you can see that, 110. Oh, here comes the cat. So I guess I'll have this in another couple minutes. We'll see how far away the mark is, but it looks like it's going to be a string's width. We'll resume here on the as the shadow hit that data point at 113, and you can see again it's not much it's not much movement, not much more than like a lead. And you want to make sure to use a really sharp pencil when you're doing this. Depending, we'll talk more. I think I've figured out a really good way to do it. We'll talk later down the video, but I just showed you a little more data. This next point is just another point near. It's just, I think, a few days before the summer solstice. Just wanted to kind of look at things, see how much the shadow was moving. It's still moving back a little bit. And then I've got pictures of the actual solstice. And so theoretically, it's the longest day of the year. So the shadow should still be going back a little bit. And according to these data points, it looks like it is still going back a little bit. Now, I'm going to tell you right now that I don't have 100% faith in this test. Like, I was still learning and troubleshooting and working through things, and it's really hard to tell with the movement being so slight, and I'll address that later in the video. There's a better way to do it than that, than using a 3-inch tall sundial. There's a better way to do it. And so what I'm trying to say is I'm trying to throw ideas out so people can maybe perfect them, and we can all work together and kind of figure this out. But I'm not necessarily saying that this confirmed that the summer solstice is actually on. It was on the 20th day of June this year. I don't think the data I collected is cool. It's too close to say doing it this way. I have some better ideas of how to do it next time, and we'll talk about that later in the video, but I just wanted to make that clear. So then I looked at another data point on the wood. It was really dirty, but I was worried about the paper shrinking or getting wrapped around the nail and moving, and so I wanted to try and get one data point on the wood, and it looked like the shadow was still moving back. And then I got a couple more data points after the equinox. Like, I think this first one is the day after, and I zoom in on that, and if you look closely at the tip, there's a mark that was made the day before, which the shadow is now covering. The tip of the shadow, it is actually covering that mark. So theoretically, it does appear like the shadow is starting to return. Again, there's still a lot of variability on all this, so I'm not. When I do maybe the winter solstice or next summer, or maybe I'll figure out the equinox, I hope to have more confidence in saying that this actually confirmed time, but right now I'm just kind of learning. So I want to discuss another pitfall I came across. I think a day or two after the summer solstice, I wanted to confirm that the shadow was moving back still, so I tried to collect a little more data. And as you can see, the shadow is very faint, like, because it was cloudy. There's a little bit of a shadow, but not much. So the first piece of advice regarding that I want to say is, when you're confirming the time like this and you think you're zeroed in on like a 2 or 3 day period where the solstice is supposed to happen, try to collect a handful of data points throughout the day, like maybe 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, maybe 3 in the morning, 3 around lunch, and 3 in the afternoon. That way, if it gets cloudy, one of your data points, you'll be able to see day to day how the movement is going. It doesn't have to be at a certain time of day, like specifically solar noon. It could be at any time of day, but it just has it does have to be the same time of day back to back. Like you'll be checking that mark at, say, in this case, it's somewhere around 446. So the following day, you need to check that mark at 446. You know what I mean? But yeah, the more marks you take, the more you can guarantee that you'll have something to come. You'll have some sunshine at some point, hopefully. But the other thing, it was there was a little bit of a shadow there, but it was so faint, and I tried to. Oh man, I tried. I tried to play with the dimness and the contrast of the picture, and I think I'm gonna have a picture kind of showing monkeying around with that. You could see it a little clearer. Even flip to the negative, and one thing that I thought was maybe if I was using, like, you know how they do the computer animations in movies these days, and they have the green background where they can kind of make it transparent or something like that. Maybe graph paper wasn't the best thing for a few reasons, but I mean if I had a different color or a different like maybe one of those computer animation background type things, maybe even just that slightest shadow, I could have used a computer program to kind of make it all transparent and be able to see where that shadow was falling. Anyway, after all of this, at this point, I was really thinking to myself, this 3-inch sundial and this movement of just like not even a pencil lead width per day was just not a good way to do this either. And so I started thinking about it one day, and I realized that the taller your object is, theoretically, the more your shadow should move in the north-south direction. And I'll try and have a picture that explains that later. But just so I thought we got a power line pole in our backyard. So it's like 30 foot tall or something. So I thought, well, you know what? Instead of my 3-inch nail, why don't I use the power line pole? And instead of it moving like a pencil width, maybe the shadow will move as much as like an inch or something, and per day. And so I tried that with the power pole, and I got a picture of that here. And then I discovered something else. With an object that is so narrow, like a flagpole or a power line pole, it's such a slim, slender object. The light from the sun really wraps around that object and almost makes it makes the shadow very, very hazy, very blurred, because the light is just kind of wrapping around that narrow object. And so I was not pleased with my testing of that. But then as I was kind of despairing about that, I walked by my chicken coop, and I noticed the roof of my chicken coop casts a very nice solid shadow. And this I was about 10 or 12 feet off the ground, and so I decided to collect some data looking at the corner of my chicken coop roof, and I am pleased to say that the shadow movement was it was clear to see where that shadow was. It wasn't blurry like the tall power pole, and the movement of the shadow was more than my little 3-inch tall sundial that I had on my porch. And so I just got some pictures I'll flip through. You can pause the video to kind of analyze these if you want to see that movement. Here at the end, I kind of put some lines and some X's on there so you can see how much the shadow moved. Those blue lines are kind of one day of data, and then the red X's are where the data was the following day. So you can see that movement is almost at least like half an inch. So that would be a good way to confirm the solstices with a taller object. because the movement is a lot more, and it wouldn't be so close that you're just not sure. It's pretty clear. And the last few suggestions I have, I was walking by my house, and I saw the chimney shadow, and that's like 30 feet up in the air. And that was nice and solid, a nice solid shadow. So I think when I do this again, I will probably be using my chimney shadow, because it's twice as tall as the chicken coop, and it is, so I think maybe the shadow will move as much as an inch. I just want to talk about this longer shadow for a minute in comparison to the little 3-inch nail I started with. If you think about it, this kind of looks like a clock, but it's supposed to be the shadow. So the red dot in the middle is whatever your object is, your obelisk, your nail, whatever, and the black kind of hands of the clock with the tip are kind of the shadow, I guess. And if it's that long, it'll trace an arc. I put a circle, but it'll be an arc. And you could say, okay, 15 minutes, you'll cover that much ground in 15 minutes. So look at that increment of space. And then what I did was I blew it up, and imagined you had a much taller object, and you can see kind of for the same amount of time, the ground that gets covered is much, much more. So, I mean, that's kind of a way to think about it. The taller you get, the shadow does move more, and it just moves more. The last thing I want to mention is this thing I came across last summer, and now it's just kind of clicking when I'm thinking about all this stuff. My sister and I just happened to watch some kind of documentary on the Great Pyramid in Egypt, and I was shocked to discover that the pyramid was not 4-sided, but it was actually 8-sided. And I've got a picture of that. You can kind of Google image it and look into it for yourself. But I found a cool documentary somewhere. I wish I remember the name of it. Maybe it was talking about the Sphinx or a courtyard near the pyramid or something. But essentially, the shadow from the Great Pyramid was set up to be like a clock. And the 8 sides were set up like that, so it would reflect the sun in such a way that it would kind of nail it down the exact date of, I think it was either the equinox or the solstice or something. But I thought that was really cool to realize that, and think about how high the pyramid is. Like, maybe they built that to make darn certain that they'd know how much that, so that they know what time of year it was. I mean, and that's the purpose of like the 8 sides of this pyramid instead of 4 was to work kind of like a clock like that. But I mean, if you think about the height of that pyramid, like, and the shadow that we've been talking about, I'm sure that shadow would probably be different by at least a foot, each day. So I mean, it would be so clear to know when the solstices are, or potentially when the equinoxes are. So I mean, if any of you happen to live near the Washington Monument or any tall structure like that, that might not be a bad object to kind of test the times with, because you'll get a shadow that moves a lot more, so you won't kind of be looking at little tiny movements and trying to figure out what's going on there. Okay, so I guess I'm going to wrap this up. Like I said, I might just have to keep thinking about the equinox. Maybe at some point something will click. But for now, the methods that I've seen used to confirm the equinox it just doesn't seem like the most accurate way to do it. There's too much room for error, and I just feel at this time that the solstice is a better way to do it. Like, there will be a day when when the movement switches direction and it starts to go north or south, it starts to head back in those portals, and you get the longest and shortest day of the year. And I just think that's an easier way to do it. And then you can count your days from there. So that's what I would recommend at this time, and I hope that we all kind of look into this and we don't just follow, but we get out there and we just start experimenting and we try and we pray and we share our information and we all grow together. And hopefully someday we will all be on the same calendar, same time, and we'll be ready for events that are going to unfold in these end times. And yeah, I guess that's it. So, shalom and Yah bless.